Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Thursday afternoon. And it was a pretty jam-packed day full of basketball yesterday, and I'm so excited that this season finally starts because now I can actually talk about the thing that I like to talk about most, and that is the game of basketball itself. So expect to see a lot more of that. And also, obviously, while basketball's still going on, I'm still going to be paying attention to football and things like that. So if you guys are also interested in football, I recommend tuning into a lot of the other sports podcasts that we have on the channel. We have so many football podcasts and as well as several sports podcasts that cover football as well. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend tuning into those and listening to what all of you, the show hosts, have to say, because everybody's going to have different opinions. So I highly recommend tuning in if you guys are interested. So in the first segment, we're going to talk about the 76ers being under investigation by the NBA in regards to Joel Embiid and his playing time. So we're going to talk about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, we have to get a little bit sad because Dejounte Murray is feared to have suffered a really, really bad injury in the previous game that he ended up playing, and it's the start of the season for the Pelicans, so that's not a good look at all. They just acquired him in a trade, and we'll talk about that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, we're going to focus on the Suns going up against the Clippers and that matchup because I actually was able to watch that game and a little bit of that matchup and give my thoughts on that game. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to recap every single one of the games, highlight some players and their fantastic performances, and as well as highlight some other players that I didn't really expect to have a bad game and, sort of expected them to perform and expect them to continue to step it up in the next game. So we'll talk all about that in the fourth segment. And we have a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. And before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, or something that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to be noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, then that's totally fine. You could always use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment as well, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. gsmcpodcast.net if you guys are interested. So it really helps the show, makes it more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's go right ahead and dive right into this main event, which is the first segment, which is going to be talking about the 76ers being under investigation by the NBA. So let me just go ahead and quickly pull up this graph right here. Hold on a second. Well, it's not really a graph, but it's a player image. There we go. So as you guys, if you guys tuned into the last segment, then you'll remember that I talked about Joel Embiid being ruled out for opening night, but it wasn't just opening night that he ended up being ruled out for. It was the entire week where he was going to be ruled out, and he just wouldn't be playing the entire week, which is honestly baffling to me. Like, at first it was just opening night, okay, I guess no big deal, but now it became the entire week just out of nowhere. And ironically enough, the game that he is supposed to return for and supposed to make his return is the game against the Pistons, which honestly, make with that what you will. However, we already have somebody in the chat. Anthony Manzano, can you explain to me what happened to Miami last night? Do you think we overlooked Orlando or we were just off? You definitely overlooked Orlando and you definitely overlooked Paolo Banchero. I thought that the Magic, and I thought that the Heat were going to end up winning this game, but Orlando is a much better team. Like I said in the previous segment, I wouldn't be surprised if Orlando ended up winning that game. And like the Orlando Magic are a much better team than they were last year, given their experience, given the fact that they also have KCP. He didn't really play that well in this game, but Franz Wagner, he was really good in the Olympics, and Paolo Banchero was just incredibly dominant in this game. I wanted to save this stat for I wanted to save the stat for a little bit later, but Paolo Banchero became the first player ever to have a game with 30-plus points, 10-plus rebounds, 0 turnovers, and a plus-minus of 40 or better. The first player ever to do that. So you can make an argument that Paolo Banchero just had a historic game. There was nothing that anyone could have done to beat that. You can make that argument. But again, Jimmy Butler didn't really play that well in that game either. He ended the game with only 3 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds. So, I mean, with Paolo Banchero dropping 30 and Jimmy Butler not doing anything for the team, going 1 for 8, you're not going to win that game. Not to mention Franz Wagner also supporting and dropping 23 points. Gary Harris coming off the bench with 18. And, I mean, it's really, it was, I don't want to say it was, a choke. I definitely don't want to say it like that. But it's just, Orlando was not losing in that matchup. It doesn't seem like it. So, he continues saying, for me, I think it's a mixture of both. We overlooked Orlando thinking we were just going to easily roll them over, and we were off because our defense wasn't good and production on offense was horrendous. Now, maybe it's possible that you guys overlooked Orlando. I don't know how you could have overlooked Orlando. I mean, they went to the playoffs last season. Paolo Banchero is probably one of the most underrated players in the NBA right now. And he's just a phenomenal athlete. He's a great scorer. He's a great rebounder. And he just had a really, really good game tonight. And I don't think there was anything that any team could have done to beat Orlando in this one. And especially with Jimmy Butler playing I don't even want to say that and finish that sentence, but he was awful in that game. In fact, every one of your players was awful in that game. But that's besides the point. Let's focus on Joel Embiid and the NBA under investigation. Or the NBA investigating the 76ers. So, as I was saying, Embiid, he was expected to not play on opening night. Then it turned to not playing the entire opening week. And that triggered the NBA to undergo an investigation under the 76ers surrounding the player and his participation. So Embiid did not play in the preseason for what the team called a left knee injury management, nor in Wednesday's season opener against the Milwaukee Bucks. I do see your comments. I'll talk about that a little bit later. I just want to get through this first. So he's scheduled to miss a few more games, and this is it's not a normal thing to do. It's really not a normal thing to say that, okay, I'm gonna miss opening night, and then out of nowhere say I'm gonna miss opening week. That's just not a normal thing to do. And he's going to miss 2 more games at the end of this week, and Friday against Toronto, along with Sunday against the Pacers. So, and it's odd, because it's not like he's playing in back-to-back games, which is something that he said he wasn't going to do ever again. So, what on earth is this? I really don't know. Now, it's typical for the NBA to review a team anytime a superstar player misses a nationally televised game due to its player participation policy. Now, what exactly is a player participation policy, and what is their player participation policy, that you might ask? Well, the NBA, let's see, when did they issue this? They issued this in January 2024, I believe, or actually way before that. But they issued the policy is essentially that it's meant to ensure that every team has a fan favorite player on the court for every game. So, the NBA, it's going to issue its first team fine under a new rule implemented in the last season. So, it forces teams to justify the rest of any of its best players and doesn't allow for multiple healthy stars to sit out at the same time. It's part of that's their player policy. So, essentially, you got to make sure that you got a star, and if he's not going to be playing, you got to have a good reason why he's not going to be playing. So the NBA speculates that the 76ers don't really have a good reason why Joel Embiid is sitting out in these games, and now they're investigating them. And it is possible that the 76ers could end up getting fined for this, as previously the Brooklyn Nets ended up getting fined because one time last season they sat out who were the players that they sat out? They sat out Dinwiddie, they sat out Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, and Nick Claxton in a game. and that, according to the NBA, that violated its player participation policy. So that's sort of like the spiel and how and how the player policy works. And do I think it's going to apply with Joel Embiid? I think that, yeah, I think maybe in the end of the day, the 76ers, it's very likely that they're going to get fined. And the 76ers said that Embiid is responding well to his individual plan and will ramp up his return to play activities this week, including going through scrimmages. But this is part of the new normal for Embiid. Like this, according to sources, there's a strategy to keep him healthy for the postseason, and the plan is expected to include periodic time off during the regular season and routine evaluations from doctors and the 76ers medical staff. Like, this is incredibly, I'm sorry, but it's like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I don't even know where to begin with this, but, you know, I understand trying to keep Joel Embiid healthy, but periodic time off? Like, really? Like, you're really just going to let Joel Embiid not play in some games? Like, seriously, and periodically, what exactly does that mean? How many games is he just going to be sitting there and doing nothing? Like, really? I'm absolutely appalled by that the 76ers are allowing this. I am appalled that this is how the league has come to, how such grown big men like this guy can be like so easily hurt and so easily, like, I don't know what is in the water I don't know what's in the Gatorade over in Philly, but like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous, and I just can't, it's something that I cannot stand. When a player cannot play games and has to take periodic time off, I get it, like, but your best ability is your availability, and the fact that he gets hurt this much is something that I just can't get behind, because his play style insinuates him getting hurt. Like, I say this every single time, flopping on the ground, landing awkwardly, just trying to draw a foul, you're going to end up getting hurt, especially with how big this guy is, and like, you know, his height and his muscle mass doesn't necessarily help it, because that's more pressure being put on his legs when he lands awkwardly, and that's an even harder fall for him if he falls on the ground. It's like, I can't, it's something I can't get behind. So that's it for the first segment, but before I end it, I do have one more comment from Manzano. So there's no reason why. It's because most of the big people who cover the NBA think this was just a one-time thing for Orlando. They're not going to make the playoffs again. That is so not true. That is not true at all. The Orlando Magic, like, the Eastern Conference is an incredibly top-heavy team. And the Orlando Magic are going to make the playoffs again. Like, they're going to be a team that makes the playoffs. Because please tell me, what team do you think could take their playoff spot? Because I guarantee you, it's like the teams that have already secured a playoff spot, the way that I see it, it's going to be the Boston Celtics, the Knicks, the Bucks, the Cavs, and I'm still lenient on the Pacers, but it's a possibility. And then that leaves one final spot. So it's most likely going to be the Orlando Magic, because the Orlando Magic can stay healthy. The 76ers cannot stay healthy, as evidently proven in this previous segment. So the reality is that, yes, Orlando is going to make the playoffs again. I don't know why you think they're not going to make the playoffs. Again, Paolo Banchero is amazing. They made the playoffs last season, and the roster only got better. It's not like there's much opposition in the Eastern Conference either to stop them from making the postseason. So even if they have to play in the play-in, do you seriously think the Chicago Bulls are going to beat them? Do you seriously think the Atlanta Hawks are going to beat them? Do you think the Charlotte Hornets are going to beat them? Like, that's not happening. The Orlando Magic are making the playoffs. Like, that's not happening. So that's all that I really have to say in this first segment. Did not really expect to talk about Miami yet. I was hoping I'd save that for the season, well, not the game recap that I have planned, but that's besides the point. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment, where I talk about Dejounte Murray and the apparent injury that he suffered in the previous game. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about Dejounte Murray and a really, really bad injury that he might have suffered in the previous matchup against the Chicago Bulls, I believe they played. And I might talk about the game as well, since we are going to be talking about the Pelicans and their matchup. They won rather comfortably. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share, we're all ears. If you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. Just click on the $sign below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. They really help the show, make the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is gsmcpodcast.net. And let's go right ahead and get into this second segment, which is going to be focusing on the Pelicans matchup and primarily Dejounte Murray and the apparent injury that he sustained in the previous game. So, according to Shams, this was a tweet from Shams, the New Orleans Pelicans guard Dejounte Murray is feared to have a fractured left hand, sources tell ESPN. Difficult opening night injury for Pelicans and Murray, who posted 14 points, 10 assists, and 8 rebounds in season-opening victory over Chicago. And to think, he played 30 minutes in this game, so imagine if he played a little bit more, just how many points and assists he would have been able to produce without having that fractured hand. So this is a very, very big problem for the Pelicans, and definitely not something that they expected coming in from Dejounte, let alone coming in at the start of the season. I mean, this is bad, and this injury exposes the Pelicans and their lack of depth, because if, the Pelicans, they're a team that has star power, yes, but they're also a team that lacks depth. And I mentioned before how they're still searching for a rim-protecting center, which is something that they really, really need. And now that they lost a key piece to them on the offensive end, their defense is, they're going to have to try and rely a little bit more on their defense to try and prevent teams from outscoring them. Since, Dejounte is not going to be able to produce for several weeks. Again, not entirely sure how long Dejounte Murray is going to be out for, but this injury is really, really bad news for the Pelicans. Now, Murray has likely sustained the injury trying to brace himself while falling in the fourth quarter of their game against the Chicago Bulls. If so, with just over 2 minutes remaining and a 12-point lead, it was very untimely. That being said, the Pelicans, thin point guard depth, it's going to get tested. Because, again, while I did say that they don't have much depth at the center, they don't have that much depth at the guard position either. Excuse me. So Jose Alvarado is going to have to play phenomenally well for the Pelicans if they have any hopes in these in the coming weeks without Dejounte Murray. And he also shut down rumors of being involved in a car accident on Wednesday, and he could end up starting in Murray's place for however long he needs to, alongside with CJ McCollum. I expect CJ McCollum to start producing a lot more for the Pelicans. And speaking of the Pelicans and their performance. Actually, let me go ahead and continue reading with this article. So it's another possibility they let CJ McCollum run the show while Murray rehabs, and the 12-year veteran obviously is more of an off-guard like type of player, but an off-the-ball kind of player. But he does have enough experience and passing ability to hold down the fort at the point guard position. Now, he even has an advantage over Alvarado in this area, but McCollum's defense is like one of the worst things I've ever seen. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. Like, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum being terrible defenders are one of the many overlooked reasons as to why Portland was unable to make it deep into the playoffs outside of 2019. And that's a problem with CJ because, again, he's not getting younger. And the older you get, chances are the less effort you're going to want to put on defense because you're trying to put more of that effort on the offense, right? So the idea of CJ McCollum trying to play defense is something that should scare the Pelicans. However, one thing that the Pelicans can leave off with on a more positive note is the fact that they ended up winning this game rather comfortably. They ended up winning 123-111 against the Chicago Bulls. Let's see. Dejounte Murray, like I said, 14, 10, and 8. CJ McCollum ended the game with 23 points, 5 assists, and along with 2 rebounds as well. And he didn't really shoot the ball all that well, 9 for 19, but still, that's like just below 50%, so it's not that bad. He also shot 5 for 11 from 3. And Brandon Ingram, this is the key performance. Brandon Ingram ended the game with 33 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. So this would most likely, if he continues playing like this would most likely increase his trade stock and possibly allow the Pelicans to increase their depth. And meanwhile, they also give a team a solid enough player in order to compete, right? So another possibility is that they actually try and sign Brandon Ingram to the max, even though I don't really think that's going to happen just based off of the trade rumors that we've heard from the Pelicans over recent years and recent memories. I mean, Brandon Ingram has been on the trade block for a very, very, very long time. And it's ridiculous how they haven't really pulled the trigger on him yet. However, they want to see if they can increase the value in trading him and trying to get more pieces for their team. So it makes sense. Now, on the Chicago Bulls side, Zach LaVine, of course, is the leading scorer for the Chicago Bulls. Ended the game with 27 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a hyper-efficient 10 for 17 from the field, 5 of 8 from 3. Nikola Vucevic also played really well in this game. Ended the game with 21 points, 11 rebounds, 1 assist, shot 8 for 12 from the field, 1 for 2 from 3. Let's see, who else played well for the Bulls? Jalen Smith, 15 points, 5 for 8 from the field. Giddey, 14 points, 5 for 11. Also was able to accumulate 5 rebounds and 3 assists along with that. And, just an overall solid performance coming in from the Bulls. It just wasn't enough to beat the Pelicans in this matchup. The Bulls shot 10 for 34 from 3, which is 29%, compared to the Pelicans, who shot 14 for 37 from 3, which is 37%. Now, the Chicago Bulls, they ended up winning the competition in the field goal department. They did shoot 48% compared to the Pelicans' 46%. But again, it's marginal. It's very, very close. It's a very close difference, not to mention the fact that the Pelicans ended up taking 11 more shots than the Chicago Bulls, and they were still just 2% off in field goal percentage. They won the three-point battle, and that was the ultimate deciding factor in them winning this game. And this is, obviously, the Bulls, I don't expect the Bulls to be a playoff team. I don't expect them to be a competent team. I expect Zach LaVine to... the hope is that Zach LaVine ends up getting traded, but I don't really think that that's what's going to happen. I don't think that Zach LaVine will get traded because the Bulls, they've been holding on to Zach LaVine for a very long time. Every single time we think he's going to get traded, he ends up not getting traded. So I'm not that confident that the Bulls are going to be able to make a deal or even find a deal that suits them. But that's all that I really have to say on the second segment. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the Clippers matchup against the Suns because I did watch that game and I watched it go into overtime. And we'll be right back after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to talk about the Clippers matchup against the Phoenix Suns. Now, I completely expected the Phoenix Suns to end up winning this game. I did not expect that the game was going to end up being as close as it was. This game ended up going into overtime, and Kevin Durant ended up hitting the game-tying shot to send the game into overtime. The game was really close to going into double overtime until James Harden ended up missing the free throw that would have tied the game and most likely would have sent it into double overtime, which was a very, very bad miss for the Clippers at that specific time. I didn't expect them to win, but I do think that kind of shot, and missing that shot in that big of a moment, it was a choke. It's really, really tough. Like, that's a very tough way to go out, because James Harden had a fantastic game. He had a great game in this one. He ended the game with 29 points, 12 rebounds, along with 8 assists as well. Almost a triple-double. Almost prime Harden performance. However, he did shoot 10 for 28 from the field, which is very, very bad. It's very inefficient. But again, having 29 points, that was way more than what I expected James Harden to come out with. And one of the big reasons why he probably didn't end up scoring 30 in this game was because of the 2 missed free throws. He only took 9 free throws in this game. So usually a prime James Harden performance would have way more free throws, and as a result would end up getting way more points. So really the only thing that was missing from this Harden performance was the free throws. And he choked in the final minutes of the overtime game and ended up missing one of the most important shots for the team. And that's a very, very tough way to lose, because he was playing phenomenally throughout the rest of the game. It's just he was, well, not really phenomenally, but he was playing solid throughout most of the game. And he just ended up missing. Like, it was a bad way to miss. I mean, the free throw is something that he's special at. And they definitely could have sent this game into double overtime if he would have made it. Now, who would have won in double overtime? It's not entirely clear, but still, this was a very, very heartbreaking loss for the Clippers. Considering how they weren't expected to win, then they came super close to winning, and then at the end they ended up choking. So, as I said, Harden was the best player for the Clippers, but Ivica Zubac was also great for this Clippers team as well. 8 for 13 from the field, 21 points. Norman Powell, 5 for 16, which is not all that great, but again, 17 points. He did go 1 for 7 from 3, which is just not ideal. In fact, the entire Clippers team shot poorly from 3. They shot 27% from 3 as a team and 45% from the field as a team, which, the 45% field goal is all right, but the 27% from 3 is less than ideal, especially when you're trying to go up against a team like the Suns, who have ridiculous firepower on the offense. Now, speaking of the Suns, as I predicted, the Suns ended up winning this game, but I didn't predict the stats properly. It's funny how I messed up. So pay attention to this. So Kevin Durant, he ended up scoring 25 points, exactly as I expected. I completely expected him to score at the very least 25, and he did. 8 for 17 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, along with 7 rebounds with that, and 3 steals combined as well. And, he had 25 points, so I was right with that. But with Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, I wasn't right with their points. Now, I said Devin Booker would score at least 24, but it turns out that Bradley Beal ended up scoring 24 and ended up getting 8 for 12 from the field and 4 for 6 from 3. So a great game coming in from Bradley Beal. And Devin Booker, he didn't score 24, he ended up scoring 15. So what I thought Devin Booker was going to score was actually how much Bradley Beal scored, and what I thought Bradley Beal was going to score was actually how much Devin Booker was going to score. So I flip-flopped the two. And the reason why Devin Booker didn't end with more points is because he only took 9 shots. And he was 4 for 5 from 3, super efficient from 3, but he only took 9 shots. So I was expecting his shot volume to be way higher than it was in this game. But still, very, very solid performance coming in from Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant, the big three of Phoenix. And the rest of the lineup didn't really play that well, but they didn't really, they sort of have to if they wanted to win this game in an easy way, in a way that I thought they were going to win this game. But the performance was sort of expected. Tyus Jones ended up going 5 for 10 from the field. 1 for 5 from 3, so not really all that impressive, but he did end the game with 8 assists, which is the most assists, and he was the starting point guard for this team. So the lineup was looking like Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and then Nurkic, which is a pretty small lineup when you think about it, but again, it's like these guys can score the ball on anybody, so that's really the idea. You have to bank on their mid-range scoring, and hope that they're efficient. Great, Grayson Allen, I thought he was going to have a pretty solid game in this one, but he didn't. He ended up going 2 for 7 from the field and 2 for 6 from 3, which wasn't the performance that I expected from him. I thought he was going to make at least 5 3-pointers, but he ended up not. So not ideal, but again, a win is a win is a win. You win by a mile, you win by an inch. It doesn't really matter. But more or less, from what I noticed, this team is still it's still the same Phoenix Suns. That's from what I noticed. The production and the scoring, the isolation scoring, how they get their buckets, it's exactly the same. So I don't really expect the Phoenix Suns to do much come the postseason. Their postseason is just going to be dependent on how often Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal can score 25 plus at the very least. And I don't think that's something that's really reliable in this league anymore. You need an incredibly solid team. You can't just rely, and I don't think it's ever going to be possible. You can't rely on isolation basketball. There's no such thing as an ISO gang. You can't do it. Kevin Durant, the Nets tried this with Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and Harden, but it ended up failing, mainly because of injuries, Kyrie being a quack, and in the year where Kyrie and Kevin Durant actually were healthy, they ended up missing a ridiculous amount of shots. I think in Game 2, they went 0 for 17 at one point after the first half, and that completely killed their momentum, and that ended the game. It was really, really bad. In fact, that game was one of the worst games I've ever seen coming in from the Brooklyn Nets, because those two players, they were taking the exact same shots that they would always make, and they ended up missing those shots. And even when they were missing, when help defense was on the way, they just refused to pass the ball. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? I get it, these are good, these are shots that you guys make, but if you're not going to make them, if you see that you're missing, get other people involved. You can't just focus on isolating and expecting to hit your shots. You have to have a good team to do that. Now, for the Clippers, I'm a little bit shocked that they were able to keep this game a bit close. So, do I think that the Clippers are going to make the playoffs? No. But are we going to expect a prime peak Harden performance now that Kawhi Leonard isn't going to be playing as much? Possibly. James Harden is most likely going to be taking more shots than anybody else on the court. So it's a very high chance that those shots end up falling, and he has a couple of his peak Harden performances. So there's a very solid chance that it happens. But again, that's just a really big shot in the dark. I don't have any faith in the Clippers. and I'm not really that high on the Phoenix Suns either, just based off of their isolation and how they play basketball. But that is just me. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that Phoenix are still going to be a playoff team? Do you think they're going to be a team that can go farther in the postseason than just the first round? And do you think they have a chance? Because quite frankly, I don't think they have that chance. But people have different opinions. So with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and go into our break and then go into the fourth segment where I recap all of the games that happened yesterday. So I already talked about 3 of them, and might as well go ahead and talk. Actually, yeah, no, I did talk about 3 of them. So I might as well go ahead and finish off the rest right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to be doing a recap of every single one of these NBA games that went down the other night. We're going to highlight some key players. We're also going to highlight some players that were rather disappointing, and as well as talk about my picks and how many teams I ended up picking right that ended up winning the game in the end. So I did this yesterday. I did this segment yesterday where I did my predictions for these games. So I'll go ahead and I'll do it, and I'll go ahead and list off the teams that ended up playing and who I picked and who ended up winning. So we'll start with the first one on the list, with the Nets going up against the Atlanta Hawks. So I picked the Hawks to end up winning in this game. They ended up winning 120-116, and talking about the Hawks, I mean, Trae Young, phenomenal. Played absolutely fantastic in this game. 30 points, 12 assists, 5 rebounds, and he didn't really shoot the ball really, that efficiently. In fact, most of his points were generated on free throws. But aside from that, 7 for 16 is pretty solid shooting, and 2 for 6 from 3. Again, not really that efficient at the three-point line. But given that this is Trae Young, I'm not really surprised that he went 2 for 6 from 3. But still, 30 points and that kind of performance, 12 assists, is incredible. And not to mention, Onyeka Okongwu, for the coming off the bench, ended up going 11 for 12 for the Atlanta Hawks and ended with 28 points. That is hyper efficient, and obviously, it was off of dunks and, layups, but still incredibly efficient, incredibly valuable. If they can get this kind of production from him coming off the bench, it's not that likely, but they could be a pretty solid team. But then again, this is the Atlanta Hawks. They have been a relatively mid-tier team for the longest time under the Trae Young era. And let's see, who else played well for the Hawks? Dyson Daniels ended with 15 points, 6 of 12 in this game. Resacher, he ended up playing in this game, the number 1 pick in the draft. However, he went 2 for 8 from the field and ended with 7 points. Now, it should also be noted that Resacher is getting barely any media attention, barely any kind of criticism for this kind of performance. Meanwhile, when Bronny steps in the game for just about 2 minutes, he gets all the criticism in the world. So I just wanted to point that out because, again, this guy is the number 1 pick in the entire draft, and he's not getting any kind of scrutiny for playing like this whatsoever. But not that I'm going to scrutinize him, but I'm just more surprised at the fact that he has not faced any sort of scrutiny yet. Now, another player for the Hawks, DeAndre Hunter, he ended with 12 points. However, he did go 3 for 10 from the field, which isn't that efficient. But again, as I said before, you win by a mile, you win by an inch. A win is a win. The Nets, they had a ridiculous performance coming in from Cam Thomas. He ended the game with 36 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and ended 14 for 27 from the field. This guy wears number 24, and he wears that number well, because let me tell you, he does not pass the ball. Like, he shoots that thing like it's nobody's business. Straight up, just anytime he gets close to the basket, Kobe, every time. It's incredible. Like, and what's even crazier is that, like, he scores a lot. Like, you can't really, like, get mad at him for not passing because he's scoring the ball pretty well. 7 for 13 from 3. And let's see, what else was I going to say? Well, one problem with him is everything else. Like, he's a ridiculous scorer. In fact, he is a bucket. But when it comes to passing and when it comes to defense, he is absolutely abysmal. And that's the big weakness in his game, his defense and the lack of passing. He doesn't want to pass because he can score the ball. And I understand, like, not wanting to pass if you can score the ball like he can, but still, you want to get other teammates involved because it's possible that these teammates don't shoot the ball well. But then again, that's probably why he just decided to take all the shots, because the Nets as a whole did not shoot that well. So Cam Johnson ended the game with 14 points, 4 of 10 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. Dennis Schroeder ended the game with 5 for 16 from the field and 13 points. And let's see, Dorian Finney-Smith ended the game 3 for 10 from the field, 8 points. And again, it's just a not very efficient night coming in from the rest of this team. They did shoot 39% from 3, however, which was much better than the Hawks and going 9 for 28 on 32%. But still just wasn't enough. They did not get the ball moving nearly as much as they would like. But again, don't really expect much coming in from the Nets in this season. Next game on the list, the Warriors went up against the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, I picked the Warriors to end up winning this game, and obviously they did. They won in spectacular blowout fashion, 139-104. Andrew Wiggins ended the game with 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. Steph Curry almost had a triple-double in this game, ended with 17 points, 10 assists, and 9 rebounds. But the big key to this piece and the best player that for the Warriors was Buddy Hield coming off of the bench. He only played 15 minutes, and he ended the game with 22 points and 5 rebounds, along with 5 for 7 from 3 and 8 for 12 from the field. This offensive system is going to work really well for Buddy Hield. Given the amount of gravity that Steph Curry attracts and the amount of pressure that he attracts with this team, there is a good chance that a lot of people are going to be more worried about Steph than they're going to be worried about Buddy Hield, thus allowing Buddy Hield to perform. Now, again, this was against Portland. The Portland Trail Blazers are not a good team. Now, aside from that, Moses Moody ended up playing really well, 5 for 11, 15 points. Trace Jackson Davis ended with 14 points, 5 for 5 from the field. Let's see, DeAnthony Melton ended the game going, 4 for 11 from the field, along with 10 points. And Draymond Green ended the game 3 for 3 with 8 points. The Trailblazers did not have a very dominant game. They did not have a solid player, aside from Scoot Henderson, who ended the game with 22 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. But he did go 7 for 18 from the field and 0 for 5 from 3. Jeremy Grant ended the game 6 for 18 for 16 points. Again, not ideal, not efficient enough. Fernie Simmons, 5 for 12, 15 points. Denny Advija, 4 for 10 and 15 points. And let's see, DeAndre Ayton, probably one of the worst number one picks in draft history. I'm sorry to say this, but it's like I cannot stand DeAndre Ayton. 5 for 12, 10 points. And let's see, how many rebounds does this guy get? And 11 rebounds. Again, not a very dominant performance coming in from the former first overall pick. Now, it wasn't last year that he was picked first overall, but that's besides the point. So the Pacers, they ended up winning in this matchup 115-109 against the Pistons, and the Pistons are still the Pistons. I just got to say that. They ended up receiving a technical foul in this game for having too many players on the court. Like, you never see a violation of having too many players on the court, or unless it's football where they have too many men on the field at a specific time of the snap count. That happens a little bit, but you rarely ever see a team put 6 players on the court. That is awful. That is horrible awareness, lack of awareness. It's just really, really bad coming in from the Pistons, and I don't expect anything to change from the previous years. And so, sorry, Pistons fans, you should have prayed that you got Victor, but that's unfortunate. The Pistons, they ended up, Cade Cunningham ended up being phenomenal as usual. 28 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds. But all of this is just essentially garbage time stats. I'm sorry to say this, but it's like these numbers are meaningless on this kind of team. And Jalen Duren, 13 points, 13 rebounds in 30 minutes. Pretty solid performance coming in from Duren. And let's see, Jaden Ivey, and he ended up getting 17 points, 4 assists, and along with 5 rebounds. And he did go 5 for 13 from the field. Malik Beasley ended up going 5 for 13 from the field, ended up getting 14 points. Tim Hardaway Jr., who's now on the Pistons, God rest his soul, mainly because I feel sorry for him, or God pray for him, excuse me, not God rest his soul, that's my bad. He ended up going 4 for 9, 14 points, but he did go 4 for 7 from 3, which is very efficient. Tobias Harris for the Pistons, who was on the 76ers, 13 points, 6 for 13 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. It's really I'm surprised that Tobias Harris ended up becoming this kind of player after what a fantastic season he previously had. Not with the 76ers, but I believe it was with the Clippers. And again, it's not ideal. It's really not ideal. Now, the Pacers, on the other hand, Miles Turner, 20 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. Pascal Siakam, 19 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds, along with 2 steals. And, they shot rather efficiently, 8 for 15 for Siakam, 7 for 14 from Miles Turner. And it should be noted, for all of you guys that don't think that Tyrese Halliburton, that think that Trae Young is worse than Halliburton, because I do remember somebody in the chat saying that Trae Young is not better than Halliburton. Guess what? Trae Young completely outperformed Halliburton in last night's games. Tyrese Halliburton ended up getting 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and shot 6 for 18 from the field. Trae Young completely outplayed him. So, Trae Young is obviously, this is not the end all be all for the entirety of the season, that I understand, but this is a start, and it's not even like he just slightly outplayed him. He vastly outplayed Halliburton in this matchup. I mean, remember, Trae Young ended the game with 30 points and 12 assists. So who is really the true point guard here? I mean, Trae Young ended with 12 assists. What happened with Halliburton? But that's all that I really have to say about Tyrese Halliburton. Enough with that. But again, Trae Young is better than Halliburton, and I stand on that. Now, who else played well? Benedict Mathurin for the Pacers ended up going 5 for 8 with 19 points, the second leading scorer for this team. And again, they're playing the Pistons, so it's not that big of a deal. So, next matchup, so far we were 3 for 3, but this is where I ended up picking wrong. The Orlando Magic ended up beating the Miami Heat 116-97. This was a masterclass performance for Paolo Banchero. I already talked about it in the first segment, so I'm not going to spend that much time on it. But again, first player in NBA history to accumulate 30-plus points, accumulate 10-plus rebounds, have 0 turnovers, and have a box plus minus of 40 or better, which is astonishing. This is a historic performance. And I don't think you can. It's really difficult to beat someone who is who's playing a historic game like this. I mean, 0 turnovers is probably the most impressive part about this entire stat, and he has 33 and 11. Franz Wagner, I already mentioned, he ended up scoring 23 points, and Wendell Carter Jr., the center for the team, ended up getting 8 points and 14 rebounds. Now, this is just Paolo Banchero just completely outplaying Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler. He ended the game with 3 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds, and shot poorly. I'm not going to really cover this game that much because, again, I talked about it in the first segment, so if you want to hear what I have to say, then you can go ahead and listen to that. Now, the Bucks against the 76ers. Actually, we're running a little bit low on time, so I'm going to have to speed run through a little bit of this. So, I picked right against the Bucks and the 76ers. The Bucks ended up winning 124-109. And this was a masterclass performance from Damian Lillard, a great performance from Giannis Antetokounmpo as well. Dame ended with 30 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Giannis ended with 25 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. And Bobby Portis off the bench, 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Tyrese Maxey was solid, not even solid. He was actually really inefficient in this game. 25 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, yes, but he did go 10 for 31 from the field. He was taking every single shot like it was his life. And Kelly Oubre, 8 for 18, 21 points. Again, they were not going to win without Embiid in this game. They weren't. And not to mention not having Paul George either, they were not going to win in this game. Next, the Cavs ended up beating the Raptors, so that's another pick that I ended up getting right. Let's see. Scotty Barnes, unfortunately, he let me down in this game. He ended with 9 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds. I hope this isn't the norm for him because I did highly encourage you guys to pick him for fantasy. I don't think this is going to be the norm for him. He only played 26 minutes in this matchup as well, but again, I just hope that this isn't the norm for him. He's a fantastic player. He fills up the stat sheet, but again, this was just not a very solid performance from Barnes. He ended the game 3 for 14 from the field. Really, really, really bad, but again, I don't think it's going to be the norm. Evan Mobley, leading scorer for the Cavs, 25 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. Donovan Mitchell ended with 21 points, 3 assists, and 2 rebounds. And Darius Garland, I mentioned I wasn't really that confident on Garland, and my confidence on him ended up proving to be correct. Ended up going 3 for 12 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, and 7 points. So, also, it should be noted, Karis LeVert ended up going 8 for 9 from the field and 2 for 2 from 3. So, a pretty solid performance and dominant performance coming in from the Cavs. And next is the Pelicans and the Bulls game. I already talked about it, but the Pelicans ended up winning 123 to 111. If you guys are interested in what I have to say, you can just rewind. Now, this is where I picked wrong again. So, Hornets ended up stunning the Houston Rockets in a huge fourth quarter comeback, all thanks to LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball ended the game with 34 points, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds. The first Charlotte Hornet player ever to open up with 30 points and 10 assists in a game. In an opening game, I believe it was. So just a phenomenal performance coming in from LaMelo Ball in this one. And, I mean, I'm very, very shocked at how well he played. Trey Mann ended up playing pretty well too, 24 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist. And that was really like the bulk of the scoring coming in from Charlotte. Same thing could be said about the Houston Rockets. The bulk of the scoring came from Jalen Green, who ended the game with 28 points and 2 rebounds, along with 9 for 23 from the field, and Sengun, who ended with 25 points, 10 for 22 from the field. However, Fred VanVleet ended up scoring only 14 points, and we did not get to see the rookie in action, unfortunately. Actually, no, we did. Reed Shepherd ended up playing only 16 minutes, but only was able to record 4 points, 2 for 5. I don't really expect a rookie to do anything in that much time, so again, not really that big of a deal. Now, the next 2 games, I'm going to skim through it. I already said that I thought the Suns were going to win, and they ended up beating the Clippers, so there's that. And then the Grizzlies. I thought the Grizzlies were going to win against the Jazz, and they ended up winning against the Jazz as well. Now, there were a lot of dominant players. Santi Aldama ended the game with 27 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Ja Morant ended with 22 points and 10 assists. Desmond Bane ended the game with 24 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Zach Edey didn't really play all that much. He only played 15 minutes in this game, 5 points, 6 personal fouls, and 5 rebounds. So that's not a very good start. He ended the game with 6 personal fouls. That's more points. No, that's more fouls than he had points. And he's the 8th pick in the draft. So not ideal, but again, a win is a win is a win. And Ja Morant played hyper efficient, 7 for 12. Santi Aldama ended up going 10 for 16 from the field as well, and with 27 points, like I mentioned before. The Jazz, they were not that great, even though Lauri Markkanen ended the game with 35 points and 9 rebounds, going 9 for 15 from the field and 4 for 7 from 3. So overall, in the recap, I ended up missing 2. I ended up being wrong on 2 of those games, which I think is pretty solid. But that's all that I have for this very long 4th segment. So now we're going to go into the 5th segment, which is going to be rather short, right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, it's going to be a bit of a shorter segment than usual. I'm going to be talking about the Lakers and their trust in JJ Redick after the previous game because honestly, I really can't get enough of talking about the Lakers, can I? Right? But this Lakers game, it was very, very impressive, and a lot of it will be attributed to their new head coach in JJ Redick. So I got this article pulled up. So the Lakers, as you know, they won the game. This is the first time that they've started 1-0 since Kobe retired. Yes. The first time that they started 1-0 in the season since Kobe retired in 2016. And this is they really heavily attributed this win not just to Anthony Davis and his dominant performance, but to JJ and his coaching scheme. So, as I mentioned before, the Lakers, they hired JJ Redick in the offseason. And when you move on from Darvin Ham, thank the Lord that happened, because look at exactly what they did in the previous game. So there was expectations that he would bring a progressed knowledge of the game of basketball, along with the ability to connect with players as a former player himself. Not to mention, now I will say, yes, Darvin Ham, he did play in the NBA before, but I will say his coaching scheme and his methods were rather outdated. He did not want to implement any sort of spacing into the system, which was a very, very big problem with the Lakers. Considering how LeBron and AD are dominant in the paint, having somebody else in the paint when they're trying to work in the paint is not ideal. I don't know why he couldn't realize that and why he didn't make adjustments, but he didn't. And JJ Redick knew this and ended up adapting to a lot of the systems that he ended up adapting to a lot of the things that Minnesota ended up throwing at him, not to mention the fact that he was just, he has a more modern approach to the game, and an approach that encourages winning. Obviously, Darvin Ham, he wanted to win, but a team that didn't want to shoot the three ball all that much is not going to be a winning team in this NBA. So this article continues. There were immediate skeptics after his hire. Of course, haters don't think that he's going to be a good coach considering his lack of experience as being a coach. However, I don't think that JJ Redick doesn't know ball. In fact, obviously, if you are a fantastic player in the NBA, you'd have to know ball. Now, there was a lot of skepticism, mainly because Steve Nash, he used to be a coach for the Brooklyn Nets, but it didn't really work out, mainly because the system, his rotations, all of this, that, it just didn't work. Not to mention the offense relying on three players, let alone eventually turning into two, was not ideal for Steve Nash. And so obviously these skeptics, when he was hired, a lot of people didn't really expect much coming in from the Lakers. But the players and the organization continuously raved. And the results showed last Tuesday. After the game, Davis spoke about what worked in Redick's game plan. So he said, the game plan, the schemes that he had on both ends of the floor, he trusts us and we trust him. As far as what he teaches us and what he wants us to do on the floor, on both ends, and it's our job to execute. I think we were very prepared tonight, Anthony Davis said. Like I said, we executed the game plan to a T. I'm not going to tell you the game plan because I know Minnesota will probably be watching this and figure out how to try to beat us next time, but our game plan was elite and we executed it and we were able to get the win. And to think, Anthony Davis thinks that the game plan, that the scheme was elite, and it could have been even better. Because remember, they only made 5 threes after taking about 30 of them. So imagine if they were to hit just a couple more threes in that game. Now, this game was never close. It never seemed like it was going to be close. I mean, the Timberwolves, they did end up mounting a little bit of a comeback to make the game close and closer to within single digits. But when JJ Redick saw that was happening, instead of waiting for the lead to get blown, he calls a timeout. Which is it's obviously you'd think that is some basic things that a coach is supposed to do. And a smart thing to do would be to call the timeout in that situation. But under previous coaching experiences with Darvin Ham, Darvin just didn't do that. This is just, it's not ideal. Darvin Ham, most of the time, if this was Darvin Ham, he would wait until when the lead is already gone and then call a timeout. JJ Redick ended up calling a timeout before they could even get the lead, thus stopping the momentum. Like, that was I don't want to say it's like an underrated thing, but that is something that not many people would pay attention to or pick up on in terms of coaching and coaching schemes, because being wise with your timeouts is a part of the coaching, and one of the big reasons why I don't think Doc Rivers is a very solid head coach, because there would be times where you would think Doc Rivers should call a timeout, but instead he doesn't, and he just lets his players play, despite the fact that they're actively blowing leads. It doesn't make any sense. This was his time on the Clippers. So also we do have somebody else in the chat I'd like to acknowledge. Keep it up, bro. I'm for NBA conversations. So he has an ear emoji there, so I'm assuming listening. Thank you so much. JJ is that young student teacher of coaches. I mean, he's very solid. He coached a very solid game, and when the 3-point shots weren't working, they had a system that ended up going into that he had a system ready going into place just in case they were missing all of these shots. Thibodeau, I don't really agree with his rotations. I think he plays his players a little bit too much, but again, his coaching, it definitely improved the Knicks at a way that I didn't expect the Knicks to even improve on. A lot of it is probably Jalen Brunson, but again, Thibs isn't really as bad of a coach as he was on the Timberwolves, I will say that. His rotations, they could use a little bit of work though. But continuing to what the article says, it didn't really take long for Redick to earn that trust with his players despite being young and inexperienced for the head coaching position. Davis reiterated the implicit trust that the Lakers have in their new coach, which was one of the things that Darvin Ham ended up losing with the Lakers. I mean, Darvin Ham, there have been reports that Darvin Ham had essentially lost the locker room because his schemes and all of this and anything that he was doing, just the players didn't really trust. And now they have a head coach that they can get behind and that they trust. And when you have that, it really goes a long way, because part of winning a championship is trust. Trust in your teammates, trust in your coaches, trust in the system. You need all of that to perform. And Davis, in the quote, he said, "We have all bought into what he is trying to build. He still has that competitive nature as a coach. You know, his will to win. He's a straight shooter. Everything like he was as a player, he's kind of transferred over, which can be tough coming from the player to the coach. But having a great staff around him, Nate, Scotty, St. Jean, Linz, Bob, it's just been, in my eyes, a pretty easy transition for him. I like him a lot, and I think what he's trying to build here and what he's doing. Now, it's our job as players to buy into what he's preaching and try to keep this going." So, again, this is only just game one, so maybe this performance was a bit of a fluke. We don't know, but I don't think so. Just based off of what I saw and how the Lakers are running their offense, I don't think that previous game was a fluke. In fact, I think that this is just a warning to the rest of the league, like, to watch out. The Lakers could be a scary team. But again, that's just preseason, not preseason stuff, but it's just the first game of the season, so no way to tell for sure. But that's all that I have on this final segment. So thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe, leave a positive review. Really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, a burning question, anything you've been dying to share. We're all ears. So if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations. That way, they really help the show, make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. If Super Chat is not really your thing, then that's okay. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations. That way, they really help the show. And that's all that I really have on this podcast for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And actually, you know what? Before I go, let's talk about, I'll go ahead and talk about the 4 games that are going to be happening later on tonight. The Spurs, they're going to match up against the Mavericks on TNT. Celtics are going to go up against the Wizards. Thunder are going to go up against the Denver Nuggets at 10. And the Timberwolves are going to match up against the Kings at 10 as well. The nationally televised games are the Spurs and Mavericks, along with the Thunder and the Nuggets. So we're going to talk about those games, and, well, tomorrow, actually. But, so for the predictions, I think the Mavericks are going to win this game against the Spurs. It's going to be close. Celtics are easily going to win against the Wizards. And I feel like I think the Nuggets are going to end up winning this game. I think that home field advantage is going to be what they need to win. And I think, I want to say that the Kings are going to end up winning in this matchup against the Timberwolves. So that's all that I have on this segment. That's actually all that I have. So I'm your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee